With the conclusion of the 2023 season, we are not only saying goodbye to another season, but we are saying goodbye to a number of things that have been a major part of the game as well. Just to name a few, we no longer have a Pac-12 conference, the SEC and Big Ten will be bigger and more competitive than ever, we no longer have a 4-team playoff after 10 years, and there is no longer an undisputed best coach in the country. With so much change within the game, I am eager as much as I am worried about what college football will look like in the near future. In this video, we will touch on a couple of the things that will be different, and along with that, outline the positives and negatives of the major changes that we will see in the upcoming season. So let's get into it. Alright, so I think the best way to kind of break this down is to just briefly go through the major changes that will come into play this season, and then once we've covered what all of them are, we can decide generally whether or not it'll be a positive or negative thing for the NCAA. Looking at the upcoming changes, we have major conference changes, the playoff expanding to 12 teams, the transfer portal, which isn't new to this season alone, but it is something that is becoming a bigger and bigger part of college football every day, so we will touch on that. And along with that, we will no longer be able to witness the greatest coach of all time. So those are the major changes we'll be looking into, and I'm sure that there are more minor changes that will be happening, but we'll just be looking into the big ones today. Let's start with the conference changes. Looking at what conference play will look like next year, the one thing that is pretty much guaranteed is a massive increase in competitive football games. Starting with the Big 12, the conference will look like this, with new teams including BYU, Cincinnati, Houston, UCF, Arizona, Arizona State, Utah, and Colorado. Teams that are exiting the conference are Texas and Oklahoma, as they are both headed to the SEC. The Big 10 will look like this, with new teams including UCLA, USC, Oregon, and Washington. No teams are leaving the conference as far as I know. Then we have the ACC, which looks like this, with new members including California, SMU, and Stanford. No teams will be leaving this conference as well. Next, there's the Pac-12, which no longer exists at all. Since USC and UCLA first left the conference to go to the Big Ten, we have seen a massive exodus of teams from the Pac-12, and as of right now, the only teams remaining are Oregon State and Washington State. I'm not exactly sure how each of these programs will classify in the upcoming season, but what I do know is that they both have struck deals to play Mountain West teams during the regular season. And finally, we have what I think is going to be the biggest impact on the game, which is the SEC with Texas and Oklahoma as the newcomers. As if this was not enough change already, all of the conferences have also decided to eliminate divisions, which means that the top two teams at the end of the regular season will play in the conference championship game. Now, when I hear that, the first thing that comes to my mind is the Big Ten, because for years now, the winner of the Ohio State-Michigan game has just had a cakewalk of a Big Ten championship game. Not like forever, but if we just look back at it, you can see since 2017, it's just been Ohio State or Michigan with a max of one loss and usually a much lesser opponent in the championship game. But now with all of this change, Michigan is set to face Texas, USC, Oregon, and Ohio State all within the regular season. So now if they have the same record they have had the past few years, we can say without a doubt that they earned it. Next, looking at the SEC, I believe this conference will be the most competitive and the most difficult to win. If you haven't already seen it, one thing that will emphasize just how hard and competitive this conference is Florida's schedule, which is just absolutely brutal. Taking a look, they have Miami, at Tennessee, Georgia, at Texas, LSU, Ole Miss, and at Florida State. And those last 5 teams I mentioned are the last 5 weeks of their season, which has got to be one of, if not the toughest, back half of a schedule that I have ever seen. But like I mentioned before, we will be getting a really competitive, highly anticipated football game every week. So for the fans, this is going to be a great thing, but for the teams involved, especially in the SEC, it is going to be an absolute grind. So overall, looking at the conference changes in its entirety, I would say it is a positive thing for college football because it brings a competitiveness week in and week out that I would say was lacking. Besides the increased grind it'll be for these players to have bigger games more often, I don't see much of a downside to this change, and it could potentially even open up an opportunity for teams to further themselves from their competition, since they'll have a chance to get more ranked wins or big game wins. The next change we'll get into is the expansion of the 4-team playoff to a 12-team playoff. Now, this is a fairly simple but drastic change to college football, which means that it will affect a number of different things. The first thing that comes to my mind is that there will no longer be a championship caliber team left out of the playoff. Since the 4-team playoff was put into place back in 2014, we've seen a number of teams who have no doubt had a shot to win it all but were left out of the playoffs due to the lack of spots. Along with this, we will now be able to let the TCUs and Cincinnatis into the playoff without jeopardizing another Power 5 school who has just 1 or 2 close losses. And when I say TCUs and Cincinnatis, I am talking about those teams who don't play as tough of competition as these other Power 5 schools, and then once they are led into the playoffs, they just get demolished. This is something that is really prevalent right now as we are just coming off of the Florida State-Alabama situation. Now with the 12-team playoff, we are living in a reality where both of those squads get a chance to capture the national title, since they would both have easily made the playoffs this year if the 12-team, was in place. This is a change that I believe goes really, really well with the conference changes. With the movement of all these teams and the number of ranked teams that'll be playing each other next year, there are bound to be some teams that are championship caliber teams but have 2 or possibly 3 losses, and now they will be able to get a shot at a championship. One downside to this change, however, is that because of the expansion, there will be a lengthened season that comes along with that, which means that there will be some teams that find themselves playing a 17-game season, which is the most that a college team has ever played. This is an issue that goes directly to the training staff and conditioning coaches, because they will have to formulate a plan or a way for their team to be sustainable for up to 17 weeks. An extra 2 or 3 games might not sound like a lot, but trust me, it is, and these players will have to be in good enough shape to be able to play up to 17 games. Because of the lengthened season, the playoffs will begin much earlier than before. They will be starting on December 20th and will go all the way until January 20th when the national championship game will be played. So overall, when looking at the expansion to 12 teams, I am really looking forward to it because it's not only going to be more competitive, but it'll allow every team that has a chance to win the championship to have a shot at it, and there will no longer be any what ifs or 5th or 6th ranked teams that just completely miss their shot. A minor downside is that these players will have to put their body through a few more hours of football than they are used to, but I'm confident that each staff will come up with a way to have their players healthy and rested for an additional 2 or 3 games. So I'm going to say that the 12-team playoff is a positive thing. The third change we'll be talking about is the transfer portal, and like I mentioned in the beginning, I'm aware that the transfer portal is not new to this season, but I'm going to touch on it anyway. Since the transfer portal was put in place and the NCAA allowed athletes immediate eligibility upon transferring, recruiting has drastically changed over the last few seasons. Another thing that sort of coincides with the transfer portal are the amount of players who are on their 6th, 7th, or even 8th year of eligibility. Now, the transfer portal in itself is not a bad thing. However, over the past few seasons that the portal has been in place, I've slowly started to realize that portal recruiting classes are becoming much more of a priority than high school recruiting classes. And this, paired with the fact that players are able to just get an extra 3 years of eligibility, now means that we will soon have college rosters with very little high school scholarship players and more 26 to 27-year-old men. Because as much as it sucks for the number of high school players who won't get one of the last couple scholarship offers, it makes sense. If you are coaching, are you going to give your scholarship to an 18-year-old that shows promise but has no experience? Or are you going to give it to someone with 3 years of college football under his belt who knows what it's like to play the game? It's a pretty easy decision to make, so no one can really hold it against these coaches for using the portal to their advantage. But my point is that this is slowly unraveling out of hand. There really needs to be some sort of cap on the amount of transfers you can have, or honestly just cut down the years of eligibility a player can have so that these kids are able to get some experience before they are juniors. So that is my suggestion, and looking at the portal as a whole in general, I do think it is a good thing. I'm glad players have that option. It really does make or break your career what school you play at. I mean, if we look at the past 8 Heisman winners, they are all transfers except for 2. But I am interested to see how the portal affects college football and recruiting in the next couple of years. The last change we'll be talking about is the retirement of Nick Saban. Now, I am an Alabama fan as well as a student at Alabama, so this is something that I had kind of a hard time accepting, but I'm not trying to make this personal, so we're just going to talk about the change in general. To say that Nick Saban was successful at Alabama would not just be wrong, it would be greatly disrespectful. We will never, ever see anything like this again. Not even talking about just Alabama yet. In his 28 years of being a college head coach, he did not have a single losing season. Then he gets to Alabama, and the man put together 16 straight 10-win seasons. 16 straight. There are programs out there who have never had 10 wins in a single season. Nick Saban comes in and gives Alabama 16 in a row. He also accomplished a couple of other things at Alabama, which include 6 national championships, producing 4 Heisman winners with at least 1 at each skill position, 11 SEC championships, 44 first-round draft picks paired with 29 total losses, and 76 first-team All-Americans. And what quite possibly might be his greatest accomplishment is that besides this last year, every single 4-year player that has come through the Alabama football program since 2008 has been able to call themselves national champions because the man has not gone more than 4 years without a championship throughout his entire tenure at Alabama. I hope you guys understand how insane that stat is. That will never happen again. Like, it might for a couple of years, like 5 or 6 max, but we will never see anything come close to the dynasty that Nick Saban created at Alabama. His coaching tree is unbelievable, and he is responsible for helping shape some of the best minds we have in the game today. I could go on forever about Nick, but the point is that he is one of a kind, the best to ever do it, and his legacy will forever be cemented in college football. So with these changes taking place in the upcoming season, I am extremely interested to see how everything unfolds. Things that we can look forward to are more competitive games more often, along with more football due to the lengthened season. There's going to be a lot that is different from this year, as we just went over, but I really think that once the games start, we'll all just be happy football is back. As long as these changes don't drastically alter the enjoyment of the crowd or the game itself, I don't think they'll be too big of a deal once we get used to them. It truly is a new era of college football, and I am very anxious to see how it goes. Alright guys, I hope y'all enjoyed this video. Make sure to like and share the video, as that helps the channel to grow. Besides that, until next time.